He was the king of the soul underworld, a man who erased enemies with a single, indifferent whisper. She was the woman he thought had betrayed him, vanishing into the ether without a trace. But when Taejun Ryu walks into a small, cinnamon-scented bakery and locks eyes with his heavily pregnant ex-wife, the silence is louder than a gunshot. He wasn't supposed to find her. And he certainly wasn't supposed to see that belly. If you love stories about dangerous passion, second chances, and secrets that can destroy empires, you're in the right place. Before we dive into this emotional roller coaster, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now. You need to see how this reunion ends, because I promise you nothing is what it seems. The morning sun had barely begun to ghost its pale, hesitant fingers across the frosted glass windows of Sweet Blossom Bakery when the atmosphere inside the shop shifted violently. It wasn't a change in the weather. The forecast called for clear spring skies over Seoul. It was a shift in the gravitational pull of the room. It was the arrival of a man who carried the depth of winter in the marrow of his bones. Taejun Ryu didn't just walk into a room, he annexed it. He occupied the space, his presence displacing the oxygen like a sudden drop in cabin pressure at 30,000 feet. He was the dragon of Seoul, the apex predator who controlled everything from the neon-soaked, diamond-encrusted luxury high-rises of Gangnam to the desperate, shadow-choked back alleys of Itaewon. He was a man made of sharp lines, expensive silk, and terrifying silence. He was a man who had absolutely no business standing in a quaint, flower-dusted shop on the edge of the city, surrounded by the domestic scent of rising yeast and warm cinnamon. But fate is a cruel playwright, often saving its most devastating plot twists for the precise moments we feel safest. Eun Ji-han had her back to the entrance. She was humming a soft, nameless tune, her hands busy arranging fresh hotteok in the glass display case. The pancakes were still sizzling slightly, leaking rivers of caramelized brown sugar syrup that smelled of childhood and comfort. The air around her was thick with the aroma of warm milk and vanilla, a sharp, soft contrast to the cold, metallic aura now bleeding through the front door. Her apron, dusted with the morning's work, was stretched tight, arguably to its absolute limit, across the swollen, undeniable curve of her 8-month pregnancy. The child within her was restless this morning, turning and kicking against her ribs as if it could sense the seismic shift in the universe, sensing that the orbit of their quiet, hidden life was about to collide with a dark, dying star. When the brass bell above the door chimed, a cheerful, innocent sound that usually signaled a neighbor coming for coffee, Eunji didn't turn immediately. She simply called out her usual greeting, her voice light and melodic, masking the fatigue that lived in her bones. "Welcome to Sweet Blossom. I'll be with you in just one moment." But the response was a silence so heavy it felt physical. It wasn't the quiet of an empty room. It was the suffocating stillness of a forest the moment a tiger steps onto the dry leaves. The humming stopped. The air conditioning unit seemed to rattle louder. The hair on the back of Eunji's neck stood up, prickling with a warning that bypassed her brain and went straight to her blood. Instinct, primal and terrifying, flooded her veins with ice water. Slowly, fighting the urge to run without knowing why, she turned. Their eyes met across the wooden counter, and, for a second, the world simply ceased to spin. Time collapsed into a singularity. 8 months of silence, 8 months of heartbreak, 8 months of hiding, all of it evaporated in a single, agonizing heartbeat. Taejun stood there, framed by the pale morning light, looking devastatingly dangerous in a bespoke black suit that cost more than this entire building. His hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place, but his face was a mask of stunned disbelief. His eyes, usually as hard and impenetrable as obsidian, widened. First came the flash of recognition, sharp and painful as a knife wound. Then came the shock, a crack in his legendary composure as his gaze traveled down from her face, past her trembling hands, and landed, with the weight of an anchor, on her stomach. Eunji. Just 2 syllables. Just her name. But spoken in that deep, gravelly baritone that had once whispered promises of eternity against her skin, it hit her like a physical blow to the chest. Her fingers went numb. The heavy ceramic tray of pastries she was holding slipped from her grasp. It didn't just fall. It crashed with a symphony of destruction. Sweet red bean paste splattered across the pristine white tiles like a crime scene, the ceramic shattering with a sound that echoed through the small shop like a pistol crack. 8 months of careful curation, of building a fortress of anonymity, lay in ruins at her feet. You shouldn't be here. Her voice was a ghost of itself, trembling so violently she barely recognized it. Her hands moved instinctively, flying to cover her belly, a futile, desperate attempt to shield the truth. As if her palms could hide the life growing inside her. As if she could protect this innocent child from the complex, violent gravity of its father. Taejun didn't blink. He didn't breathe. His eyes were locked on her hands, on the curve they were trying to hide. That child. He started, his voice rough, sounding like it was being dragged over broken glass. Eunji, look at me. Tell me. She was already stepping back, her heels scuffing against the floor, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. The kitchen door was too far. For the first time in months, her grandmother, Halmiani Okeja, wasn't in the bakery. She was at the market. Eunji was alone. Completely exposed. Please. Just leave. Please. He moved then. Not like a normal man, but with the blurring speed of someone trained to kill. One moment he was by the door, the next he was reaching across the counter as she stumbled backward. His hand shot out, not to strike, but to steady her. His long fingers wrapped around her wrist. It wasn't painful, but the grip was absolute. An iron shackle. He was making a statement without words. You're not running. Not this time. Never again. The heat of his skin against hers was a brand. It burned through 8 months of winter. The bakery had gone deathly silent. Eunji finally noticed the men by the door, his personal guard. They stood like stone sentinels, blocking the exit, their eyes scanning the street, ensuring no one entered, no one left. The few customers who had been sipping coffee were frozen, mugs halfway to their lips, paralyzed by the sheer radioactive tension radiating from the couple at the counter. In Seoul, you didn't need to be a criminal to know the Ryu family face. You knew it from the news, from the rumors, from the way the air turned cold when they were near. Taejun was the crown prince of that darkness. And he was currently holding the wrist of the pregnant baker as if she were the only lifeline in a drowning ocean. Listen to me closely. If your heart is racing right now, if you can feel the tension snapping like a wire, you need to smash that subscribe button immediately. You have to click it to know what happens next, because this isn't just a reunion. It's a collision. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and hit that like button if you think she should run or stay. Do it now, because the story is about to take a turn you won't see coming. I need you to pause and understand the gravity of this moment. This isn't a soap opera where ex-lovers bump into each other at a coffee shop and make awkward small talk about the weather. This is about deadly family traditions that go back generations. This is about blood oaths that bind tighter than love. This is about heartbreaking deception that shattered 2 lives and nearly destroyed everything they had built. This is about a woman weeks away from giving birth, hiding from Seoul's most dangerous man. Not because she fears his violence, but because she was made to believe he never wanted her or their child. That she was disposable, replaceable, a mistake he needed to erase. Life and death hang in the balance of this reunion. Let me take you back to where it all began to help you understand the weight of this moment. The history that makes this chance meeting so explosive. Eunji Han wasn't born into Seoul's glittering upper class. She was born of flour, sweat, and resilience. She was the granddaughter of Halmiani Okeja, a woman made of steel who had survived the horrors of the Korean War by selling steamed buns on the rubble-strewn streets. That grandmother had built Sweet Blossom Bakery from nothing, kneading her sorrow into dough until it became sustenance, building a legacy with bloody fingers and a back bent from labor. She'd raised Eunji after her parents died in a ferry accident when she was just 7 years old. The memory of standing at the gray, foggy harbor, waiting for parents who would never return, had shaped Eunji into someone who expected abandonment. She was a girl who believed, deep down in her marrow, that everyone she loved would eventually leave. The bakery became Eunji's whole world, her sanctuary from loss. She learned to coax dough into submission before she learned algebra. She could tell when honey had crystallized by smell alone. By 25, she had modernized her grandmother's recipes just enough to make them fashionable again. Sweet Blossom became known for their perfect balance of traditional flavors with contemporary presentation. In her hands, centuries-old Korean desserts found new life. Food bloggers and Instagram influencers began featuring their hotteok and yagwa. The tiny bakery began attracting customers from across Seoul. What Eunji didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the quiet street where they'd operated for 40 years had recently become part of Taejun Ryu's territory. The protection money her grandmother paid monthly went directly to his organization, though they never saw the man himself. His collectors were polite, almost respectful of the old woman and her talented granddaughter. After all, even criminals need somewhere to satisfy their sweet tooth, and Sweet Blossom's reputation for the best honey bread in Seoul had reached even the shadowy, smoke-filled corners of the criminal underworld. Taejun, meanwhile, lived in a penthouse 47 floors above the city. From his floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul spread beneath him like a glittering offering, a circuit board he knew how to operate perfectly. His family had risen from the ashes of the Korean War, but through blood rather than flour. 3 generations of carefully cultivated violence and strategic alliances had placed the Ryu family at the very peak of Seoul's criminal hierarchy. His grandfather had started with a single gambling den in Itaewon. His father had expanded to protection rackets and nightclubs. Taejun had brought them into the digital age, money laundering through cryptocurrency, blackmail facilitated by state-of-the-art surveillance. At 32, Taejun had already proven himself more ruthless, more cold, and more intelligent than his father. His enemies disappeared without a trace, erased from existence. His allies prospered under his protection. He moved through the city like a shadow with teeth, rarely seen, but always felt. Those who crossed him did not get second chances. Those who served him loyally were rewarded beyond measure. But for all his power, all his wealth, all his feared reputation, Taejun was profoundly alone. His world was filled with people who either feared him or wanted something from him. Never someone who simply wanted him. His education at elite international schools had separated him from traditional Korean society. His family business separated him from legitimate social circles. He existed between worlds, belonging fully to neither. These 2 worlds, hers of flower and early mornings, his of luxury cars and blood oaths, should never have collided. But they did. On a rain-soaked evening when Taejun's lieutenant hired Sweet Blossom to cater a business meeting. It was a meeting where territories would be divided, where men would pledge allegiance or declare war. The kind of meeting where decisions made would ripple through Seoul's underworld for years. Eunji arrived with boxes of carefully crafted yagwa and hotteok, traditional sweets presented with modern elegance, arranged on platters that transformed simple street food into art. She wasn't supposed to stay. Just deliver, set up, and leave. But then Taejun, exhausted from hours of circular arguments, tasted her signature honey bread. It was still warm from the oven. Sweet and savory with a hint of cinnamon that reminded him of childhood visits to his grandmother's home before the family business consumed his life. Who made this? He asked his lieutenant, interrupting a tense negotiation with a rival family. The question traveled across the room until it found Eunji, who was already gathering her things to leave. Their eyes met for the first time across the smoke-filled room, and something inevitable clicked into place. She should have been intimidated by him, by the deference shown by hardened criminals, by the aura of controlled violence that surrounded him like a cloak. Instead, she saw something familiar in his gray eyes. Loneliness. The same isolation she felt even in a crowded bakery. He showed up at the bakery the next morning before opening hours, requesting a private tasting session. She knew who he was. Everyone in that neighborhood knew. The whispers about the Ryu family traveled faster than gossip about K-pop stars. She should have been terrified. Should have kept the door locked. Should have called the police, though what good would that do when half the department was on his payroll? Instead, she found herself unlocking the door, letting danger walk right into her life. "Teach me," he said simply, gesturing to the kitchen. No one had ever asked to learn from her before. They wanted her creations, her talent, but never the knowledge behind it. That morning, she showed him how to fold dough for the perfect hotteok. His hands, capable of violence she could only imagine, proved surprisingly gentle with the delicate pastry. Their courtship was a secret, hidden deep in the folds of the city. Hidden from his family, who expected him to marry the daughter of a rival crime boss to secure an alliance that had been planned since both children were in diapers. Hidden from her grandmother, who would never approve of a man whose hands were stained with invisible blood, who would fear rightly that Eunji was walking into a world she couldn't possibly understand. They met in night markets where they could be anonymous among the crowds. He would arrive in nondescript cars, leaving his usual entourage behind. For those precious hours, he wasn't Taejun Ryu, heir to Seoul's most feared crime family. He was just a man in love with a woman who didn't look at him with fear. She showed him how to eat bindiedik with your fingers without dripping, laughing when sauce inevitably ran down his wrist. He taught her which street vendors were secretly fronts for money laundering operations, which ones to avoid, which ones had the best food. "How can you tell?" she asked as they passed a seemingly innocent fish cake stand. "The money never adds up," he explained, wiping sauce from her chin with his thumb. "Too many customers who don't eat. Too much cash for too little product." She should have been appalled. Should have walked away from this glimpse into his world. Instead, she found herself fascinated by the invisible city that existed alongside the Seoul she thought she knew. 3 months of stolen moments. 3 months of him learning the language of dough and butter, of fermentation and proofing. 3 months of her learning not to ask about the calls that would pull him away in the middle of dinner, about the bruises sometimes visible on his knuckles. 3 months of falling in love with the man beneath the monster everyone else saw. 3 months before he whispered against her hair, "Marry me." Not a question, not quite a command. Something in between, as complicated as the man himself. "Your family," she started. "Doesn't matter," he cut her off. "Not for this. Not for us. My grandmother will understand when she sees how much I love you. And the rest? The rest is noise." They wed in secret with only his most trusted lieutenant and her childhood friend as witnesses. No white dress, no family celebrations, just vows exchanged in a small temple outside the city, followed by a night in a traditional hanok with paper walls and a view of mountains that had witnessed centuries of similar secrets. He gifted her a jade necklace that had belonged to his grandmother, the only woman in his family he had truly loved. "This is real," he promised her that night as rain drummed against the ancient roof. "What we have is real. Everything else is business." For 8 months, they lived in carefully orchestrated shadows. She kept working at the bakery, never telling her grandmother the truth about the man she now called husband. He kept her existence hidden from his family, protecting her from their world, from their judgment, from their potential retribution. They met in a small apartment he bought in a quiet neighborhood, playing house like normal people while the city slept. In those walls, they could pretend they were just a normal couple, just a man and a woman building a life together. 8 months of happiness before everything collapsed. It started with whispers. His cousin, Min-jae Ryu, had always resented Taejun's position as heir to the family business. Min-jae was a snake in a garden of wolves, not strong enough to lead, but venomous enough to kill. He had always looked for ways to undermine Taejun, always thought himself more deserving of the power, the respect, the fear that came with the Ryu name. When Min-jae somehow discovered Taejun's secret marriage, perhaps through bribing the building manager, perhaps through following Taejun on one of his visits to the bakery, he saw an opportunity, a weakness to exploit. A way to finally take what he believed should have been his all along. He approached Eunji one morning at the bakery, waiting until she was alone. He introduced himself with a smile that never reached his eyes, the kind of smile that made the skin crawl. "My cousin has sent me to deliver a message," Min-jae said smoothly. She hadn't known Taejun had family visiting from Busan. She didn't question why he wouldn't come himself or at least call. The photos Min-jae showed her seemed real enough. Taejun at a restaurant with a beautiful woman. Their hands touching across the table, their faces close, intimate. The woman was everything Eunji was not from an influential family, dressed in designer clothes, perfectly poised and elegant. The kind of woman who would make a suitable wife for someone of Taejun's position. "The engagement is being announced next week," Min-jae said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "He wanted you to hear it from family rather than see it in the business papers. The alliance is too important for distractions." The word cut deeper than any knife. Distraction. Is that all she had been? A temporary amusement before returning to the path his family had laid out for him? Eun-ji would have questioned it. Would have called Taejun immediately. But Min-jae's next words froze the blood in her veins. My uncle is a traditional man. If he discovered Taejun had married someone like you, someone with no family connections, no status, it wouldn't just end badly for you. My uncle has destroyed entire families for less. Your grandmother's bakery wouldn't survive the week. This neighborhood would suddenly become very dangerous for elderly women who ask too many questions. The threat was clear. Crystal clear. Then he placed the divorce papers on the counter. Taejun's signature was already on them, the ink looking fresh, the strokes sharp and aggressive. She stared at that signature, the same signature she had watched him place on their marriage certificate 8 months ago. The same sharp strokes, the same distinctive flourish at the end. He's trying to protect you, Min-jae lied, his voice hypnotic. This is the cleanest way. Sign. Disappear from his life, and everyone stays safe. He gets his suitable marriage. You keep your little bakery. Everyone wins. With shaking hands, believing she was protecting both Taejun and her grandmother, Eun-ji signed. The pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Each stroke was agony. She was signing away her heart, her future, the man she loved. But what choice did she have? Her grandmother was all the family she had left in the world. And Taejun, if he truly wanted this other woman, this alliance, who was she to stand in the way? 2 weeks later, she discovered she was pregnant. The timing couldn't have been crueler. By then, her calls to Taejun went straight to voicemail. His apartment had been emptied. It was as if he'd erased himself from her life completely. As if the 8 months they had shared had never existed at all. The jade necklace he had given her became a painful reminder of promises that had proven as fragile as sugar glass. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Taejun had been sent to Japan on urgent business. A rival organization was threatening their interests in Osaka, requiring his personal attention. By the time he returned 2 weeks later, Eun-ji had vanished. Her grandmother claimed she'd gone to study pastry in France, seizing an opportunity too good to pass up. The apartment where they built their private world was empty, with only the faintest trace of her perfume lingering in the closet. No note. No explanation. Just gone. Which brings us back to this moment. The shattered pastry on the floor. The grip on her wrist. The dangerous silence. 8 months, Taejun growled, his voice vibrating with a terrifying mix of fury and pain. 8 months I have hunted for you. Eun-ji stared at him, confusion warring with fear. What are you talking about? You sent the papers. You sent Min-jae. She tried to pull her wrist back, but he held on. I never sent anyone. I never signed anything. I saw your signature. Min-jae came here. He showed me the photos of you and that woman. He said. She choked on a sob, her hand clutching her belly. He said you wanted to erase your mistake. Taejun went completely still. It was the stillness of a bomb the second before detonation. His gray eyes darkened, the pupils dilating as the realization hit him. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place. The sudden disappearance. The forged note. His cousin's sudden helpfulness during the transition. Min-jae, he whispered the name like a curse. He told you I wanted a divorce? He said your family would kill my grandmother. Tears were streaming down her face now. He said I was a distraction. A distraction? Taejun looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the toll the last 8 months had taken, seeing the life she was carrying. There was no other woman. There was no engagement. I was in Osaka fighting a war to keep our territory so I could come back to you. I came home and you were gone. The air in the bakery seemed to crackle. The tragedy of it hung between them, two people who loved each other, torn apart by a lie. And this. Taejun's gaze dropped to her stomach again. His voice trembled, stripping away the Mafia dawn, leaving only the man. Is this? Yes, Eun-ji whispered. He's yours. Taejun let out a sound that was less human and more like a wounded animal exhaling. A laugh, a sob, a growl, all strangled together in his throat. He looked at the ceiling, then back at her, his expression fracturing. I am going to kill him, he said. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a threat. It was a simple, scientific statement of fact. My own blood. My cousin. He stole 8 months of my life. He stole the first heartbeat of my child. Eun-ji opened her mouth to speak, to bridge the gap between them, but the universe had other plans. A sharp, blinding pain tore through her abdomen, sharper than a knife, hotter than fire. She gasped, the sound wet and terrified. Her knees buckled. Taejun moved faster than thought. He caught her before she hit the floor, his arms turning into a cradle of steel and velvet. Eun-ji? What is it? The rage in his eyes vanished, replaced instantly by a panic that bordered on madness. The baby? She managed to grit out through clenched teeth, her face twisting in sudden agony. It's too early. The stress. Her doctor had warned her about this. Her blood pressure was a ticking time bomb. High emotions were the trigger. And today, the bomb had gone off. Taejun didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for permission. He swept her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing, holding her against his chest like she was made of antique glass. We are going. Now. My grandmother. She whimpered, clutching his lapel, the expensive fabric bunching in her fist. She'll come back and find the shop empty. I will handle it, he commanded, his voice brooking no argument. My men will wait for her. They will explain. You are the only priority. He strode through the bakery, his long legs eating up the distance. The staff arriving for the mid-morning shift flattened themselves against the walls, eyes wide as saucers, watching the terrified dragon carry his queen out into the sunlight. Outside, the black Mercedes Maybach was waiting at the curb like a dark beast. The driver, a man named Kang who had seen things that would turn other men's hair white, didn't blink. He sprang out, opening the rear suicide door before Taejun even reached the curb. Taejun slid into the back, pulling Eun-ji across the leather seats, curling his body around hers as another contraction ripped through her. Seoul University Hospital, he barked at Kang. Call Dr. Elena Cho. Tell her we are inbound. Tell her if she isn't waiting at the trauma bay, I will buy the hospital and fire everyone in it. The car surged forward, merging into the chaotic Seoul traffic with the aggression of a tank. Inside the hermetically sealed cabin, the silence was broken only by Eun-ji's sharp intakes of breath. Taejun's hand was in her hair, smoothing it back, his touch impossibly gentle. Breathe, he whispered. I have you. I have you. But as he held her, his other hand reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone. His face underwent a terrifying transformation. The worried husband evaporated. The monster returned. I need to make a call, he murmured to her, his lips brushing her forehead. Just breathe. He dialed a single number. When the line connected, the temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. Find Min-jae, Taejun said. His voice was devoid of emotion. It was dead. I don't care where he is. I don't care who he is with. Drag him out. There was a pause as the voice on the other end asked a question. Alive, Taejun corrected, his eyes fixing on the rearview mirror, cold as ice. Bring him to the Incheon warehouse. Do not let him speak. Do not let him bargain. Eun-ji, through the haze of her pain, listened in horrified fascination. This was the duality of the man she loved. With one hand, he was stroking her swollen belly, murmuring soft comforts to their unborn son. With the other, he was signing a death warrant. He forged my signature, Taejun continued into the phone, the words dripping with venom. He lied to my wife. He hid my heir from me. I want him to understand exactly what he has taken before I take everything from him. If you're feeling a dark sense of satisfaction right now, if you believe that betrayers deserve exactly what's coming to them, smash that like button. Justice is about to be served cold. And don't forget to subscribe because Min-jae isn't the only obstacle they have to face. The car swerved around a bus, the driver laying on the horn. Taejun didn't flinch. He made 3 more calls in rapid succession. It was a masterclass in destruction. Call the family banker, he ordered on the second call. Freeze Min-jae's assets. Every account. Every hidden crypto wallet. If he tries to buy a pack of gum in 10 minutes, I want his card to decline. Call legal, he said on the third. Revoke his security clearance. Strip his name from the company registry. He is a ghost. He hung up the phone and tossed it onto the seat as if it were contaminated. He looked back at Eun-ji, his eyes softening instantly. Almost there, my love. Hold on for me. The hospital entrance was a flurry of activity. Dr. Elena Cho was waiting. She was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen enough trauma to remain unimpressed by gangsters. "Stretcher," she yelled as the Mercedes screeched to a halt. Taejun didn't wait for the orderlies. He lifted Eunji out of the car himself, placing her onto the gurney. "Her blood pressure is spiking," he told the doctor, rattling off medical details he had memorized during the months he searched for her. "She is in early labor." "Stop it." "I know my job, Mr. Ryu," Dr. Cho said sharply, running alongside the gurney as they burst through the double doors. "You need to step back." "I am not leaving her side," he snarled. "Then stay out of my way, or I will have security remove you, and I don't care how many men you have outside." Dr. Cho didn't blink. Surprisingly, the Dragon of Soul obeyed. He retreated to the corner of the VIP trauma room, watching with hawk-like intensity as nurses hooked Eunji up to monitors. The room filled with the rhythmic beep-beep-beep of the heart monitor, a chaotic, fast rhythm that matched the fear in Taejun's chest. For 4 agonizing hours, time ceased to exist. It was a blur of intravenous fluids, magnesium sulfate to lower her blood pressure, and hushed medical commands. Taejun stood like a statue in the corner, his fists clenched so hard his knuckles were white, silently bargaining with whatever gods would listen. "Take everything else," he prayed. "Take the empire. Take the money. Just let them live." Finally, the rhythm on the monitor slowed. The tension in the room broke. Dr. Cho pulled off her gloves and turned to Taejun. "We've stopped the contractions. The baby is in distress, but stable. Her pressure is coming down." Taejun let out a breath that shook his entire frame. However, Dr. Cho continued, pointing a stern finger at Eunji, who looked pale and exhausted against the white sheets. "Complete bed rest. No stress. No work. No running away. And you," she pointed at Taejun, "keep the Mafia nonsense away from this room. She needs peace, not adrenaline." "She will have the silence of a tomb if that is what she needs," Taejun vowed. When they were finally alone, the silence that settled over the room wasn't dangerous anymore. It was heavy, yes, loaded with unsaid words, but it was safe. Taejun pulled a chair to the bedside. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the blue veins in her wrist. "I thought you left me," Eunji whispered, staring at the ceiling. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. "I thought I wasn't enough for your world." "There is no world without you," he replied, his voice rough with exhaustion. "When you left, I didn't live. I just existed. I was a machine. I expanded the territory, I made the money, I scared the right people. But I was dead inside." He stood up and leaned over the bed, hesitating for a moment before placing his large, warm hand on the mound of her belly. "May I?" he asked, his voice trembling. She nodded, covering his hand with hers. "Say hello to your father." At that moment, the baby kicked. A strong, distinct thud against Taejun's palm. The man who could order the destruction of a rival clan without blinking crumbled. His forehead dropped onto their joined hands. His shoulders shook. For the first time in his life, Taejun Ryu wept. He cried for the 8 months lost. He cried for the deception. He cried for the miracle of the life beating beneath his hand. "I swear to you," he choked out, lifting his head, his eyes red-rimmed and fierce. "Nothing will ever separate us again. No one will ever threaten what is mine. My family. My blood." The recovery room was not a room. It was a fortress of solitude with a view of the Han River, a suite usually reserved for diplomats and royalty. Taejun had the entire floor cleared. Security guards stood at every elevator bank, invisible to Eunji but omnipresent. He arranged for everything. Before Eunji could even ask, her belongings were collected from the small apartment in Busan. But the most important arrival came the next morning. The door opened and Halmiani Okeja walked in, looking small but formidable in her floral cardigan. Taejun stood up immediately, straightening his suit jacket. This was the Dragon of Soul, a man who stared down knife-wielding assassins without blinking, yet he looked terrified facing this 80-year-old woman. Okeja ignored the luxury of the room. Her eyes went straight to Eunji, then to Taejun. She studied him with a gaze that felt like it was peeling back his skin to check the quality of his soul. "So," she said, her voice raspy but clear, "you are the one. The one who put the sadness in her eyes." Taejun bowed. It was a deep, 90-degree bow, a gesture of supreme respect that he hadn't offered anyone since his grandfather died. He stayed bowed, eyes on the floor. I promise you, Hermione, I will spend the rest of my life ensuring that sadness never returns. Okay, Ja, let the silence stretch. She had survived the war. She knew men. She knew the difference between a man who talks and a man who acts. She looked at his hands capable of violence, now trembling slightly as they clenched at his sides. You will protect them? She asked. Even from your own blood? Especially from your own blood. Taejun rose, meeting her gaze. I would burn the world to ash before I let a spark touch them. The old woman nodded, a sharp, decisive movement. Good. The bakery needs strong hands to carry the flour sacks. I'm getting too old for the heavy lifting. It was a blessing. It was acceptance. 3 days later, they vanished. Taejun did not take her to the penthouse in Gangnam. That was a glass cage exposed to the city. Instead, he took her to the mountains. The Ryu family owned a traditional Hanok estate hidden deep in the forests of Bukhansan. It was a masterpiece of architecture, ancient timber beams meeting modern security systems. We stay here until the baby comes, Taejun said, carrying her across the threshold despite her laughing protests that she could walk. Then we decide our next move. Together. That word, together, was the foundation of their new world. For the first time in 8 months, Eunji slept without nightmares. The mountain air was crisp, smelling of pine and wet earth. She woke up to the sound of birds, not traffic. Taejun never mentioned Min-jae. He never spoke of what happened in the Incheon warehouse. But one evening, he returned to the estate after being gone for 5 hours. He went straight to the bathroom and washed his hands. He scrubbed them for a long time, staring into the mirror. When he came out, he seemed lighter. The shadow that had haunted his eyes, the shadow of betrayal, was gone. Justice, dark and absolute, had been served. Eunji didn't ask. In their world, some answers were better left in the dark. She simply took his clean hand and placed it on her cheek. 2 weeks early, the universe decided it was time. The labor was fast, intense, and terrified the medical team Taejun had on standby in the guest wing. But nature took its course. A girl was born first. She had Taejun's intense eyes and Eunji's delicate mouth. They named her Hannah, meaning one or first, a symbol of their unity. But the silence of the room was shattered 12 minutes later. Dr. Cho, who had come up to the estate personally, looked at the ultrasound monitor and then at Eunji with wide eyes. Push, she commanded. You are not done. What? Taejun looked like he might faint. What do you mean, not done? There is another one, Dr. Cho shouted over the chaos. He was hiding behind his sister. It's a twin. A boy followed his sister into the world, smaller, but screaming with a lung capacity that rivaled an opera singer. They named him Duyun, the path, for he would forge his own way. Taejun Ryu, the king of the underworld, sat on the edge of the bed holding 2 bundles of life. He looked completely undone. This man, who controlled an empire, was terrified that his callous fingers might bruise their soft skin. They are so small, he whispered, tears tracking silently down his face. Eunji, we made these. We made them. They are small, she agreed, exhausted but glowing with a primal strength. But they're strong. Like their father. If you are crying right now, or if you just love a good surprise baby reveal, you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Don't just watch, join our community. Comment below. Would you forgive a secret like this? And tell me, are you Team Hannah or Team Duyun? Let me know in the comments. In the weeks that followed, the lion emerged from his den. Taejun didn't hide his family. He weaponized them. He organized a formal gathering at the Ryu ancestral home. It wasn't a party, it was a coronation. He walked into the main hall, Eunji at his side, the twins in their arms. His father, the patriarch, sat on the dais. He was a hard man, a man of stone and outdated traditions. He looked at Eunji, the baker with no pedigree. He looked at his son, who had defied him. Then he looked at the babies. Taejun stepped forward. This is my wife. These are my heirs. Anyone who disrespects them disrespects me. And anyone who disrespects me. He let the sentence hang in the air, heavy with the promise of violence. The patriarch stood up. He walked down the steps, his cane tapping on the marble floor. He peered into the blankets. Diyun reached out a tiny hand and grasped the old man's finger. The stone crumbled. The patriarch's face softened into something resembling humanity. He has the Ryu grip, the old man grunted, a hint of pride in his voice. And she. He looked at Hannah. She has the eyes of a queen. He turned to the room of assembled lieutenants and family members. Welcome them, the patriarch commanded. This is the future. With the family secured, Taejun turned his resources to the other pillar of his life. Sweet Blossom Bakery was not just restored, it was reborn. He bought the entire block. He renovated the building, expanding it into a flagship store that blended rustic charm with high-end elegance. Halmiani Okeja was installed as the honorary director, overseeing a staff of 20, ensuring the recipes remained authentic while the business scaled. It was the perfect marriage of flour and finance. 1 month after the birth, they held the Bekayal, the traditional 100-day celebration. The estate was decorated in white and gold. The babies wore miniature handboks, vibrant with color. Red threads were tied gently around their wrists to ward off bad luck, though with Taejun as their father, bad luck wouldn't dare approach within a 10-mile radius. Family gathered. Gangsters in Italian suits drank tea with bakers in flour-dusted aprons. It was a surreal, beautiful collision of worlds. Late that night,